Welcome to our webinar today on creating a recruiting funnel that closes effectively. My name is Sandra Grauscha. I'm the customer marketer here at Loxo. And I'm joined today by Lex, who's head of content and branding, and by our presenter today, Vivien Maron, who's our customer success lead. And she has helped to coach hundreds of successful companies here at Loxo to do the kinds of things that we are talking about today. So just before we get started, I'd like to give you a couple of reminders. We will have some time at the end for Q&A. We probably won't get through all the questions, but we'll try to do as many as we can. We're looking for questions here that are both relevant to the topic we're talking about today and applicable to everyone. So if you have a question about your account, please do reach out to support by going into your Loxo platform and clicking on the question icon at the bottom left. They'll be happy to help you, but we can't answer individual questions today. So that's everything I have for you today. I'm going to turn it over to Vivien.
Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate your time and excited to walk you through all of this. In terms of funnel and ratios and making clarity of your funnel, it's really about knowing what are your ratios. How many screening calls do you need to do to then actually get the interviews? How many interviews do the candidates need to actually go through? How many candidates need to go through the interview process for you to then actually make a placement? And that way you can determine not just your search capacity in general, but also what is the minimum that you need to do for each search to know, okay, I've hit it. So in my past life, I was a recruiter, and I remember vividly a conversation I had with my manager where I was incredibly frustrated because I've reached out to hundreds of people. I screened so many people, and yet I didn't have anybody to submit, and the search wasn't really moving forward. And when we took a look at my numbers and my past ratios, it was because I didn't have enough submittals. So it didn't matter that I reached out to hundreds of candidates and talked to a lot of them. It was because I needed to increase my submittal numbers. I had a different search at the same time where I had to do much less outreach. And it was very close one-to-one where my screening calls were translating into submittals that were translating into interviews at like close one-to-one ratios. So this webinar is supposed to help you figure all of this out, how to make sense of it. So part of it is sometimes you feel like you have a really strong month. Other times it's like, wait, why are things slowing down? So the goal of this webinar is to just really help you get that clarity of what actually makes for a really strong month so that you can recreate it consistently month over month, year over year, keep growing and being successful. And that way you can also analyze what actually worked and start identifying the things that are actually preventing you from hitting the ratios or kind of like what's in the way of you being really successful. What we will cover is what exactly do you need to benchmark to prevent chaos? Where is the friction actually happening that is messing up your funnel? And then how to actually reverse engineer what works so that you understand the math behind your work and you know where to put more resources in or where something is happening. My question for you guys, and drop that into the webinar chat, is do all of your searches benchmark the same? So from one job to another, are your numbers the same? Do they vary? Have you thought about why they might vary? Okay, somebody said they vary. Yep, it's the talent pool. Sometimes that is true. I had that experience myself. It varies depending on the job requirements. Yep, that is very true as well. Another one that is a really good call out by Paul is ours vary depending on level of role and difficulty of search. And with that, we're actually going to jump to the next one. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is actually the different type of searches that you are doing. So if you are just ingesting hundreds of jobs through a VMS, the number of jobs that you're going to have are going to be a lot, but you're not actually going to fill all of them. For specialized kind of like mid-level type searches, this is where you will have more consistent ratios and exclusive executive search type agreements that you have in searches, a lot of times those will be one-to-one. You get a job, you fill it, or very, very close. And so this is just in terms of the number of jobs that you're getting. Just because you get a job, that doesn't necessarily mean that you will fill it. And so even your number of recs that you receive versus the ones that you close, there will be a little bit of variance there. And we're going to then dive a little bit more into the candidate side of things. But before that, we're going to chat about what is actually a winnable search. So when you're looking back at some of the searches that you felt were really good, really successful, what were some of the things that you noticed worked really well there, as opposed to the searches where they didn't work out well, or you put in a lot of work and then they ended up ghosting you, the hiring managers, not the candidates? What were some of the things that you identified as, oh, this is the type of search that actually is very successful? Was there anything that you guys noticed with those? Attractive comp, good company brand, big talent pool, strong mission and values for the role, high communication with hiring managers, exclusivity, not looking for a unicorn. Yeah, those are all really good ones. Transparency and collaboration, strong partnership and feedback, market timing. Yeah, those are all really, really good ones. And clients are they're willing to look at transferable experience. That's very, very true. All right. So in terms of what actually works, you guys have called out incredible things. All of them are very much true. And so those are actually the things to look for and determine, do you have all of these in place when you are doing the intake call before you even start the search? Do you know whether somebody else is also working on this? Is it a competing agency? Is the internal hiring team still trying to work on this and find that? Is there an actual urgency by the hiring manager? Are they looking to actually make that placement, or are they kind of okay without it? Is the pain point big enough for them? Are there clear requirements, and are those realistic? This is where we're starting to talk about the purple squirrel or the unicorn. Is what are the requirements? Are they clear? How flexible are they on them? What are the true must-haves versus the nice-to-haves? There were so many times where I've had a hiring manager say they must have a bachelor's degree at minimum, but they were also required to have 10 plus years of experience. So this is where I would go back and I would actually say, okay, imagine you have a candidate that has 10 years of experience, has all of these different things that you want, the must-haves, the nice-to-haves, but they don't have a bachelor's degree that they completed 10 years ago. Would you still want to talk to them and potentially hire them? And a lot of times that ended up being, yes, of course, I need somebody that has the right experience. So sometimes you can also kind of wiggle around with what they're saying are requirements that are deal breakers if they're not there, and kind of like clarify all of that. Compensation is a really, really big one. I know every recruiter knows this. This is where a lot of times the candidates that they would actually love to have are outside of the compensation range. And then hiring managers are like, wait, but they don't have all the things that we want, even though they're in our comp range. So there's a couple of things that you can really work out with hiring managers on that front. Next is hiring manager access. You obviously need their feedback, their communication, not just you submit someone and they say no. Ideally, you would also hear back from them about, hey, I thank you for sending over this candidate. The reason why I don't want to move them to their first interview is because of XYZ. And that way you can get that feedback to recalibrate your candidate pool and who you submit. So that way your ratios are really good. You're adjusting the candidate pool that you're contacting. You're adjusting your screening process. And then maybe it's a matter of just changing how you are presenting the candidates. But all of these together make for successful placements that are also efficient. So if none of those are present, then obviously you're fighting an uphill battle. Now, as recruiters, you probably have been in those situations and you know how to deal with those, but those are usually not fun. And a lot of times you can actually get ahead of those during the intake call in general. And that will just prevent those things that come down the stream. Next up, niching is a math decision. So something that a lot of you have mentioned is that it varies from search to search, it varies on the talent pool and things like that. This is where niching is actually incredibly helpful because then you are in a very specialized place that is really good for branding purposes. But separately, that also means you actually know what the market wants and what candidates are actually looking for because you're constantly doing the same thing. And you're not also starting every single search from scratch, but you have a pre-existing talent pool that you can actually use to start presenting. So this actually improves your time to fill. It doesn't increase it, reduces it, it improves it. And so you want to take a look at if you niche down, you become a subject matter expert in that particular area. So when hiring managers are coming to you with the different requirements that they have, with the comp range that they have, you already know during the intake call from your past experience in that niche whether those are realistic or not, so that you know whether this is a search that you can realistically fill or if this is going to be an uphill battle. And before you even spend the time to source, talk to candidates, and then tell hiring managers what is happening and why candidates are not getting submitted, you already have that up front and you can have that conversation to even figure out, are they able to change some of the requirements? Are they flexible in that? How open are they to that? And that way you can decide whether you actually want to take on that particular search, knowing that this is going to be an uphill battle and that you're essentially looking for some form of a purple squirrel or a unicorn. So with that, this is where then you can also know what are your ratios. I need to screen this many people. I already have this many people. And this is where your ratios become very consistent because what somebody mentioned in the chat is how big is that talent pool? If you're doing one search where their talent pool is huge and it's very easy to find people, but then the next one is very different, this is where your ratios are changing and it's going to be really hard to tighten all of that. So becoming a subject matter expert is incredibly helpful. Really successful recruitment agencies, they're very much known to be in a specific segment, and that makes companies look out for them as opposed to you having to do a whole lot of business development. So there's a lot of benefits downstream for those. Now, let's take a look at some of the friction that can happen, how to diagnose it, and how to get ahead of it. So, the first one is obviously, and this is on both sides, interest versus motivation. People can be interested in a lot of things. I am interested in getting into music, learning how to play an instrument. Am I truly motivated to actually do that? Have I purchased and chosen an instrument to sink my teeth into and start learning how to play? No. So you want to really determine, are you actually dealing with candidates that are motivated to make a change, or are you just talking to people that are keeping their opportunities open? Neither one is wrong or bad. But when a candidate simply says, oh, I'm just always wanting to talk to a recruiter, just keeping my options open, but you're not really identifying a motivator. So I'm a huge fan of the clamps. Those are the 6 motivators that make somebody change jobs. The clamps stand for challenge, location, advancement opportunities, money, people, and security or stability. So when somebody is saying, oh, I'm just open always to exploring, usually the reason why somebody gets on a call with a recruiter is because something is not quite right at their job. And they just might not be comfortable with saying that just yet. So there are always a couple of things that you can do to really get down to the true motivations. But then there's others that are very open about, I'm incredibly frustrated at my job. I was told that I would have upwards mobility. Growth was promised. I've been here for 3 years. Nothing has been delivered. This is where then you're seeing, okay, they're looking for advancement opportunities. That is one of the motivators. Ideally, throughout the conversation with the candidate, that screening call, you're looking to get about 2 different motivators because that's usually what it takes for them to really start moving. And so you already have one, growth was promised but never delivered. You also want to look for another one. And sometimes with growth, there's also a different set of challenges that they're looking to sink their teeth into. So as a follow-up question, when somebody says, I was promised growth and that never happened, you can ask for, what kind of growth were you looking for? Is it you just wanted a better title, but then there's new responsibilities, new challenges. What really excites you about that like growth and next step? What were you really hoping for, to see if you can find some other motivators there? Ghosting. I know that everybody has had some experience with ghosting, and a lot of times ghosting happens due to some form of lack of clarity. So, why exactly are they interested in leaving? You want to find out what their pain points are, because if the job truly is the right thing for them, the next step for them, you can keep pitching it, because essentially you're not just doing business development to sell your services to hiring managers, you're also selling the job to candidates. So to ensure that there's really consistency and clarity, you want to reiterate, hey, at your job, this is kind of like the current pain points that you have. Based on the conversations that you and I have had, that you have had with the hiring managers, it sounds like you would actually have those opportunities here. So you want to keep reiterating that, but you can't do that if you don't know what their motivators are. What do they currently love about their job? Ask that during the screening call to make sure that it aligns with the role that you are recruiting them for. If there's a mismatch with that, they're going to find out during the interview process, or at the very least when they start and then decide to quit within the guarantee period. And then you have to start from scratch. Either way, not a really good experience. And another way that you can ask for what is really important to them, and that's something that I used in every single screening call, is if you had a magic wand that could fix one thing, what would it be? And if that fix that they mention is something that is available in the new job, let them know. And that way you're kind of making sure that they're aligned and excited about this opportunity specifically, as opposed to just, I'm excited to get out of this job to go anywhere else, because there's going to be some downstream effects to that. And this is where the disconnect check is really important. The disconnect check is really just making sure what is really important to them in terms of their job is also present in the new job. So you just really want to make sure that what they loved about their job is present in the new job, or if it is not, that that is an intentional decision that they're making, that they're giving up what they love at their current job to do this new thing, and whether it is something that they actually are looking forward to doing. Now, a lot of times when you're talking to candidates, sometimes they will have some wild compensations that they're looking for. So if you ask, hey, what is your target compensation? What are you looking for? Sometimes they will just say a number that is very out there. And so a lot of times you then want to ask, hey, out of curiosity, how did you arrive at that number? Or just to kind of ask some questions to have a better understanding of why exactly are they looking for this. Now, in some cases, you might come across candidates where they will say, I'm actually making X amount here, and the comp that this position is offering is significantly lower. You'd want to double check, hey, this comp is lower. I know that you want to take a step down from this manager level. You want to go back into being hands-on individual contributor. That comes with a pay cut. Is this something that you can make work? It's good to double check that, because if they realize, oh, I am about to make $20,000 less a year, that has real repercussions on their day-to-day, their quality of life, their bills, their families. This is where ghosting or late stage rejections might come from candidates just saying, I actually can't make this work. Make sure you're getting ahead of that. In terms of reverse engineering, what actually works? You first need to define what your candidate funnel looks like. So obviously that includes, you are sourcing people, you're contacting them, you're setting up screening calls with them, you're submitting them over to the hiring managers. They go through the interview process, and then somebody gets an offer, or multiple people get an offer if multiple jobs are open and available. And then that leads to placements. So you want to make sure that you are looking at the critical parts of this that are actually translating to money. A lot of times that is, how many candidates do you need to screen to actually submit them? Because that is the first thing that is client facing at that point. And then from the submittals, how many of those candidates actually get moved to the interview process? Submittals to interviews, you want those to be 1-to-1. because that means there's a match between your understanding of the role and what they're looking for in a candidate. And you are pitching this correctly to candidates, you're identifying the right ones. That then converts into interviews, offers, and placements, and so forth. So you want to make sure that you have those critical stages mapped out somewhere so that you can run these numbers. So one way to do this is look at your most recent job where you made a placement and kind of go back, review what happened. Do a little bit of like a post-mortem, but obviously that might be a good one if that was a particular good search, or if it was a really tough search, that is a great learning experience. And some of the things that you can look at is how many interviews did it take? By interviews, how many candidates had to go through the interview process? So it doesn't really matter if a company has 10 interviews or not. You're more so looking how many candidates made it into the interview process, and then kind of take a step back. How many candidates did you screen and submit to be able to get to that number? How many people did you actually have to source and contact? Then go back a little bit further. What was the intake like? Did you have all of the info, or was there a pivot where they saw a handful of candidates and were like, this is not what we're looking for at all, and you had to do a realignment call? And what was it about the motivation from both sides, hiring managers and candidates? What were some of the kind of common themes that you're seeing so that you can learn from that? And do this for every search that you close. That way you can see what is working and what is not working. And that will essentially fine-tune your gut instincts to know closer to the start of a search, is this going to be a successful search, or is this going to be an uphill battle? So some things that you can take a look at is when you're a brand new recruiter or you have been recruiting for many years and you change your niche. If you're in a brand new area, your funnel will look a little bit higher. It will be more the volume heavy side. And then as you get the experience within a specific niche, you get to know the candidates, those numbers will start improving and they will look closer to something like the calibrated funnel. Now, you guys know that sometimes it takes hundreds of candidates just to get some kind of feedback back, but every conversion gives you a little bit more insight into what is happening. Where's the disconnect, right? So if you have to reach out to a lot of people and you're not hearing back from them, are you reaching the right ones? Are your messages kind of like sparking their interest? Are they even seeing them? So there's a lot of different components that you can take a look at to then move towards a more calibrated funnel. And over time, as you get more experience, you develop that gut feeling for these things, and you learn from things that went really well and things that didn't go as you hoped. You can then start getting ahead of those sooner, which then turns into a more efficient and calibrated funnel. And that way you can be a little bit more picky, because then you'll be successful quicker. And that leads to a good experience for everybody, for you, for candidates, for hiring managers. This also leads to capacity, meaning if you have hundreds of searches that you really want to dive into, which is a really good thing to have happen to you, it's also a matter of, can you deliver the speed and quality that your clients need from you? And so by doing this exercise, you can actually figure out, okay, at minimum, I need for one placement for any given search on average, I need 5 candidates to go through the interview process. I need to screen 15 people, which means in terms of my capacity, I can actively work on 3 searches at any given time. All the others will have to take a little bit of a backseat or get deprioritized. Obviously, these numbers will look very different for everybody. It's going to be something that you have to take a look at, run your numbers, and then you'll get a better sense for what does your capacity look like and how quickly and how well can you deliver for your clients that will make for repeat business. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but postmortems lead to improvements, because that way you can revisit and take a look at what were the things that were within your control that you could have done earlier? And what were some of the signs that maybe this was going to be a search where the hiring manager is ghosting you? And that then also impacts your capacity, because do you want to spend your time investing and searching into a search where you're starting to notice signs of disengagement from that hiring manager, where there might be some ghosting on the hiring manager side of things? And as you recruit and do this for a long time, you will start to notice these patterns, and then you can actually invest a little bit more time into a search where a hiring manager is engaged and you're seeing a lot of green flags. So take a look at the searches that have worked really well for you, and take a look at the searches that didn't go as well, or maybe the ones that you have actually lost and they didn't lead to a placement. How come that happened? Was there anything that you noticed up front? And kind of then make data-driven decisions moving forward in terms of the searches that you're taking on and how you handle those. Some of the things that you can kind of use to check on these things is what happened during the intake call. Did you get all the information that you needed? Was there any lack of clarity on any parts? Were there unrealistic expectations? Did you know that right at the start, or did you have to recalibrate at a later time? Did timing stall? You started sending over candidates and you weren't hearing back for a week, or they were dragging their feet on actually scheduling interviews for candidates that they really liked. Where was their motivation? Was there maybe any kind of competition with another agency, with their internal hiring team? Was there a realistic comp alignment, or was it something where they were looking for a unicorn in a price range that is a big mismatch? All of these things are going to help you start identifying these things, so that next time a bad search shows up, you are more likely to catch on that this might not be the best search for you to spend your time on at the intake call, and really clarify those things. And that leads for a better client experience. Your clients do rely on your honesty, and give them the advice that they need to hear, even if they don't like it. And that leads to an overall better experience. And that way, your reputation as a recruiter with candidates is also good, because then you can be very realistic about timelines on the hiring manager front and things like that. Candidates love clarity. In closing, sometimes it's not necessarily about more volume. So if you're a brand new recruiter, it will always be a volume game at the beginning as you're calibrating your spidey senses. And as you're kind of learning the market, how everything works, volume and more activity will definitely be something. But as soon as you kind of get the hang of things, things start to streamline a little bit more, and you should have consistent funnels. And with that, you will have a lot more clarity. But to start recognizing that, you have to have the clarity so that you can see, okay, what are the searches where I can actually invest the time in that are going to yield really good results and really good partnerships with those hiring managers, versus ones that are probably not that good. And so part of this is know how many jobs you have, what are the different segments, what are your actual ratios in the funnel, what are the motivations and are they there, and understand your capacity to make sure you can handle all of that. So after this session, what I recommend is take a look at your last 5 or so searches that you have closed. That way you can actually find your ratios, map the funnel, meaning identify how many candidates did you have to source to then contact them, to do the screening calls, to submit them, how many candidates actually ended up interviewing to get that one placement. Calculate your ratios if you have searches that are different segments, meaning one is temp with very high turnover, where you just have like an evergreen pipeline, versus an executive search one. Those are going to be different. You don't want to mix those ratios. And then take a look at your capacity to see, is there anything that you can do? Are you kind of maxed out right now? Where could you put a little bit more time to make sure that the search keeps moving? Things like that.
If you scan that QR code, it will take you directly to the registration link. So you can sign up to attend. That one is going to be all about writing outreach that gets consistent replies. This is something that's come up time and time again recently. We've heard a big uptake in people wanting to hear more about how to write really good outreach. And most recruiters, you're sending a ton of outreach every single day, but many recruiters have not been trained on copywriting best practices and fundamentals. And so this is going to be a deep dive on some strategies for writing really good emails that increase your response rates. We'll also touch a little bit on subject lines and stuff like that. That's a little bit more on the open rate side of things, but this will be mostly about just writing really good emails. So excited about that one. If you're excited too, feel free to scan the QR code and sign up.
Thanks so much, Lex. Yeah, let's jump into the Q&A. And before I do, let me just say, if anyone has to leave or when you leave after the Q&A, we have a little survey that comes up. I'd really appreciate it if you take the time to fill it out. It's only a couple of questions. It's anonymous, but it goes a long way to helping us build webinars that are more effective for you guys. So it's worth the time to just let us know how we did today and what you'd like to see in the future. We have very few questions so far in the Q&A. I would like to remind you, if you have any questions, put them there. But I'm going to break my rule and take one from the chat because I see it. And that's from Hope, who said, I'm not with Loxo yet, but I'm assuming Loxo makes it easy to track all of this. Vivien, can you talk just for a moment about how we do this in Loxo?
Yeah. So one way to do this is a candidate insights report where you can take a look at how many candidates have been in each step of the pipeline. And you can do this on a per search basis. And if you group it by the stage, but essentially the bars will show you this is how many you have contacted, this is how many you have screened, this is how many have gone through the interview stages, this is how many actually ended up getting placed. And then you can do segment by job, and each bar will then have a different color for the job so that you can visually see, are these numbers consistent across your jobs or not? And then you can calculate the ratios that you're looking for and kind of like average it out and things like that. But yes,
Fantastic.
you can do the math and Loxo.
We have a question about, yes, increasing the number of submissions is good, but what if we only have one submission for a job? Do you have any advice on that subject?
So if you only have one submission and that actually gets a placement, that is a great job. That is incredibly rare, though. This is where you want to have a couple more jobs, and that is probably an outlier that I would exclude from the calculations because it will drive your averages down when you calculate them, and then you will have a lower benchmark than what it actually is. One submittal with one placement, I've had this happen before. Loved the search, but that was genuinely a stroke of luck, not something that was realistic by any stretch of the imagination. I loved when those happened, but that's something where I would exclude that. And when you have that one submission, are you getting feedback from the hiring manager? If yes, and they're moving through the process and it ends in a placement, great. If you're not hearing back, submit one or two more. And if you still don't hear back, something is not quite right. Check in with the hiring manager and divert your resources to a search where you have more engagement from the hiring manager, because it needs to be a two-way street. You are working with your hiring manager, and if they're not responding, then it's not going to lead to a placement.
Thank you. How do you take advantage of automations within Loxo without sounding like a robot? Personalization is so important, but also time consuming. And is there a way to A/B test in Loxo?
So we do have A/B tests. And when you are in Loxo and you're creating the outreach, there's a tiny plus sign right underneath where you can then click on that plus sign. That's when you're in the outreach tab. And you can then add a A/B test. I think the most I've seen is all the way through K that one customer did. They went crazy to see what approaches work. They really wanted to narrow that down. If you are setting up the outreach campaign within the job through the stage automation, on the bottom of that little kind of like box for the outreach, there is like right like underneath, like, do you want to include your signature checkbox, things like that. next to the retry button, there is an A/B test option where you can click on that and it will give you the B version option that you can use. And in terms of automations for bulk outreach, this is where the reason why things sound very robotic is because a lot of recruiters have a very similar writing style. This is where the next webinar is going to be super helpful. But to give you a little bit of insight, if you're like, hey person, I love your background, you have a great opportunity. That sounds robotic because every recruiter says that. I was very much guilty of that as well until a candidate was like, you sound like every other recruiter. This is why I never want to talk to recruiters, but I'm desperate for a job. And so it worked out in my favor, but I ended up switching things. So one of the things that I do is I used to do dad jokes that were work friendly and safe for work about that particular profession. So one that I vividly remember is when I was looking for superintendents in the construction industry, my subject line was the first person's name. I'm just going to use you as an example, Sandra. It would say, Sandra, what do construction workers do at a party? Then they had to open the message and it said, raise the roof. And now it's like, hi, Sandra, I hope this made you chuckle, but I'm actually reaching out because I have a superintendent role. Here are the cool things about this role. I don't really go into the background of that person or like, I think you have great experience. That's pretty self-explanatory when a recruiter is reaching out to you, that you have the experience that this recruiter is looking for. You can skip that. Go into why this job is great. Highlight some of the things where when they read through that, they can be like, hold on, that sounds really cool. I don't have that at my job. And so you kind of want to touch on the motivators, the claims as you're describing that. And that way it doesn't sound robotic. It sounds a little bit more tailored.
I love that joke. I would open that email for sure.
I've gotten that jokes back. My response rate was incredibly high. People enjoy humor and laughs. If they don't, maybe that's not the right candidate to work with anyways.
Chat says, haha, dad jokes, let's go. The next question, so going back to the candidate report, is that a report that's already built within Loxo?
Yes and no. So every single customer that I have worked with ends up setting up their Loxo differently. I would recommend reaching out to the support team so that they can help you create the particular report, because people rename things, people end up setting up different activities. All of this is perfectly fine, but sometimes there are out of the box reports that we build for Loxo that comes as a default before it gets configured and you get onboarded. Sometimes those are not in alignment with how you're actually using the system. So sometimes they might need a little bit of tweaking. Reach out to support@loxo.co. They'll be able to help you out and help you figure out how to make a report work if it's currently not working. But the default one is there.
Thanks so much, Vivien. That was all the questions we've had today. So I'd like to thank you again for joining and remind you, please sign up for the next webinar if that's interesting for you. I'm really looking forward to it myself. And thank you for coming. We'll see you next month.
Bye, everybody.